Hi, everybody. Good evening. One more session of the book club. And I know that we were all expecting Varsha Ghate to be here to talk about Alice Munro and her short stories. And I'm sure some of you have read the stories that we put up and were ready for that. Well, I'm sure she will come on and talk to us very, very soon. Meanwhile, I made her a promise, actually. I said, don't worry. We'll wait till the last day. And if you can't do it, never mind. We'll bring something else in. At that time, I didn't really think I would have to do that, but it has come to that. She isn't well. So here I am with the cherry orchard instead. Now,
by the way, do we require someone to introduce Mohini? Okay.
I'll introduce
Mohini is a
myself.
professor of English literature, retired, supposed to be retired, but enjoys her work so much that she continues to teach again and again and again. She has written 2 books, and a PhD thesis is a huge big tome and can be about 3-4 books from there on also. Mohini and I started this book club. Now it's 20 years and it's going stronger and stronger and stronger thanks to you all. And Mohini, take over now.
Okay, thank you.
And Kusum is having something nice to eat. And Amal det nahi hai.
Okay, so as I said, I have brought my cherry orchard in over here. I want to begin by saying that I think that probably more than half the people present today might not have read the play. Maybe some of you have watched the movie version. Maybe you've seen it performed, but I do realize that like people just read novels, for the fun of it, or they read nonfiction for the serious stimulation that it gives. But hardly anyone reads plays, I think, for reading, which is such a pity, a great pity. Anyway, so this is a play, so I'm not sure if you would have read it, by Chekhov. Now, everyone has heard of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. I think everyone has heard of Chekhov as well. And most of us would have read a lot of his short stories, maybe during school or college, somewhere in the syllabus. And I remember the stories that I have prescribed for, some syllabus somewhere along the way. They're very chock-a-block full of things happening, like a story like The Bet, which spans several years, I think 20 years or something. And this happens, that happens, the other happens. There's no room to call Chekhov a stylist, in those short stories. But the plays are a different matter. And I think I will start sharing my screen now. I have a skeletal set of slides to show. Okay, so Anna says she read it when I was teaching it to St. Mira's. Okay, students. All right, yes, the cherry orchard has been in our syllabus. The first time I taught it was when Prashant had put it in the MA syllabus at the University Department of English. And by the way, I learned about the cherry orchard at Prashant's feet. He was my professor, and this was a text in the MPhil. So the Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov. I thought I'd start with a number of covers and stills from the film starring Judi Dench. Everywhere, the actual cherry trees feature. And this is something very important in the play. And the stage directions also say that the cherry trees in blossom are visible. There are windows at the back of the set. And the trees of the orchard and the trees are actually visible. They're a very vital presence. This is Chekhov, and you see the dates, 1860 to 1905. The Cherry Orchard was performed in 1904, so he died soon after. This was kind of his swan song. In one of the pictures, he has his wife with him, Olga Nipper, who was an actress at the Moscow Art Theatre, which very successfully produced the Cherry Orchard. Now, a little bit about the Russia that Chekhov writes about. So the dates, 1860, 1905. So these dates are close to significant events that happened in Russia. So in 1861, just 1 year after Chekhov was born, the serfs were emancipated. And you will recognize that 1861 is practically identical to the date 1860 when slavery was abolished in the United States. So the two things happened, as parallel events practically. And this is because Alexander II saw himself in a sort of international context. He wanted to be part of Europe. He wanted to be progressive. He wanted Russia to be part of Europe, and part of the European movement. In Chekhov's lifetime, he saw 3 tsars. So Alexander II, Alexander III, and Nicholas II. And very close to the time that he died, that very famous event called Bloody Sunday happened, in which workers were marching to protest against the conditions in which they worked. They wanted better working conditions. They wanted the power of the officials to be circumscribed just a little bit, because they were all powerful and the workers were entirely helpless. Now they were unarmed. It was a non-violent, peaceful protest, but the police fired on them. So, shades of Jallianwala Bagh or something. It was a very horrible occurrence. The Russian serfs, had a very bad deal. Of course, I don't have to say this, the word serf or slave, I think that it connotes the terrible work conditions, the terrible living conditions, the merciless way in which they were treated. Now, in Russia, the serfs were not allowed to move from the land on which they worked. And one character in the play at one point, Anya's governess, says that she's concerned, she's anxious because she doesn't have papers. Now, what papers would she be having? You and I require a passport if you want to leave the country. But if you're just wandering around our own country, you don't need papers, do we? But every Russian required identity papers. And the police would swoop down on people, unsuspecting people, and demand papers. Now, many of them didn't have papers because the offices which were supposed to prepare those papers were not doing their work. So the people were helpless, but if they didn't have papers, they would be arrested. I mean, it sounds to me very sadistic. They would be arrested, and once they were arrested, oh, heaven help them, because then they were just sent off, to prison somewhere, and it might be Serbia for all you know. And once they went there, they were usually never heard of again. And they might very well have been entirely innocent. So other than the poverty, like I believe 4% of the Russian citizens owned all the land, and the others were very poor. So this complete social inequality existed, the very rich and the very poor. In this play, you see the emergence of a new middle class. And I think the story in The Cherry Orchard is one that is echoed all over Europe. The old order changeth, the life of the landed gentry who were rich because there was so much money in agriculture. But then when they lost their very inexpensive or even free labor, then agriculture ceased to be so profitable. So they lost their money, and the money went into industry, and a new set of people, the industrialists and all that, they made money. So the economics of the place was changing. So the Russia that we see in the plays of Chekhov is, of course, before 1917. He died in 1905. Chekhov shows you the Russia that was contemporary in his time, the Russia that he wrote in. Now, that Russia was very backward. It was 300 years behind Europe in terms of progress. It was still agrarian. It had not become an industrial nation yet. Now, the country itself is this huge country. Now, on the one hand, we see in this play and the other plays, the pride that the Russian people have in the hugeness, the size, the expanse of their country. But on the other hand, it's a very cold country with a very harsh climate. And I believe it leads to gloominess, and suicide is common among young people, and so on. It's a very difficult climate to live in, especially if you're poor and you can't afford to make yourself comfortable. Now, the czars were hardly known for their democratic means, were they? So suppression of freedom, a very powerful police, shall I say, a very empowered police who were allowed, to treat the people any old how. Officials were very corrupt. I think I don't need to explain this. I know that everyone in our country will quickly understand what I mean when I say that it is an inefficient state. Now, I know that when it's announced that ration card holders have been given so many kilos of rice or wheat for free, we always wonder, does it really reach them? So that kind of situation. Then, of course, Siberia, we've all heard of Siberia, that convicts were sent to Siberia, and Siberia is almost impossible to survive in. So it was terrible. Not only the treatment, but the climate itself would finish people off. Now, Alexander II, I said, wanted to see Russia in an international context. He wanted to be on par with other European nations. So there was what I call a brief flurry of reforms under him. And that's when the serfs were emancipated. But Alexander III and Nicholas II, who came after him, withdrew and retracted. And so there was regression rather than progression. Okay, so I'll just, allow you to just see these quickly, because I really want to focus on the play and the text and not talk too much about the situation in Russia, but this is just a reminder. So Chekhov was born in a place called Taganrog. Now, I'm sure none of us have heard of Taganrog, but in those days, it was a very important port on the Black Sea, a very popular port, and therefore people from all countries came there, sailors and so on. Now, Chekhov's father ran a small grocery shop, and these sailors would come, to the shops, and they would be speaking various languages. So Chekhov grew up hearing many languages. He grew up seeing many nationalities, many different kinds of people, and it could only have helped him. His ability to spin a yarn might possibly have come from those early stories that his mother told him. His grandfather had been a traveling salesman, and she traveled with him, and they had lots of adventures, and she would tell the children of these adventures. So the children were close to their mother, but the father was rather tyrannical. And I gather he wasn't very nice to his wife either. And of course, the children hated that. Now, briefly, Chekhov did attend the Greek school for boys. And apparently the Greek part of the community in Taganrog was considered the cream. They were the richest, the most cultured, and so on. So going to the Greek school must have helped him very much. From an early age, he wrote little sketches, little reviews to be performed, little stories, and so on. Now, his father overextended himself, meaning I guess he took a loan and which he couldn't repay. And then to avoid arrest, the family disappeared overnight to Moscow, but leaving our Anton Chekhov behind. He was 16 at the time, and he was left behind to complete his school education. He had 3 years more to go. So he was on his own, and he was fending for himself. And these stories, which he wrote and had published in newspapers, were his source of funding for his education. So from a very early age, he was on his own. He visited the family in Moscow. He had hoped to join them there, but was sent back until he completed his education there. However, after his school education, he came to Moscow, enrolled in the medical school there, and completed that course and became a doctor. So he was a practicing country doctor while he wrote the plays that we know about. Now, Chekhov's grandfather had been a serf, so which is why he says there is peasant blood in me. And this is exactly the situation of one of the characters in the play, Lopahin, whose grandfather was a serf on the estate, which is called the Cherry Orchard. And when you see him in the play, he's about 40 years old. When you see him in the play, he has become a rich businessman. So he represents the new middle class, that is arising, that is just beginning to exist in Russia. Unfortunately, the climate in Moscow did not suit Chekhov. Chekhov developed TB. Unfortunately, almost as soon as he qualified as a doctor, he was diagnosed with TB, and he had to live in the country. So he bought this estate called Melikova, which was 40 miles outside Moscow. He lived there, and his wife could not leave Moscow because she was an actress and she had to be there. So they had a sort of weekend marriage. Now, he seems to have been a very good human being. Now, the landed gentry, there are many images in literature that we come across about the landed gentry. There is that image where they are very benign, caring, responsible, parent-like figures, so the tenants, the workers who work for them, who are on the estate, whether slaves or otherwise, they look after them, they nurture them, they're like parents. So he was one of those, a very conscientious landlord. He looked after his tenants, he looked after the laborers who worked for him. He gave a lot of medical aid for free. He built schools, he built hospitals, he gave a lot to charity, he was patriotic. And I want to say that he must have been such a humane, caring person. He was very curious about the way prisoners must live in Serbia, and he was very concerned about them. So you and I would sit here in our armchairs and say, oh, I wonder how they live. I wonder how they survive. So sad. But he actually went there. He went, to Serbia. He went to the Sakhalin Island, which is an entire prison island, and he wrote about them. So at a young age, this is 18, he starts writing plays and short stories, and so on. Now, he loved theater, and once he went to Moscow, he had the opportunity to see plays. So Sarah Bernhardt was the actress in those days. But his comment on her was that her acting was very artificial. Now, I'm sure many of us know about Sarah Bernhardt and that very exaggerated kind of acting that they had in those days, where it's very hero-centric, where the main character would sort of stand and hold forth and probably have applause and then move on, not natural, not realistic acting at all. Now, this is not the kind of acting that Chekhov visualized his plays to be staged with. He made some interesting contacts. I won't go into that. But people appreciated him. He became very closely connected with a landscape artist and the owner of a newspaper, which was doing very well. And all these influences, shaped him to a certain extent. Now, when he wrote The Seagull, that was his first full-length play, it failed in its first performance. But then he met Stanislavski. Now, I'm sure most of us have heard of Stanislavski. So Stanislavski brought about practically a revolution, in theater. And he believed in naturalistic acting. He believed that actors needed lots of rehearsal time, that they must know their dialogues perfectly, that they must know their gestures and their expressions that were to go with that dialogue, and they must rehearse so that it's a very seamless, perfect performance. Also, that the actor should live the role, so say 3 months rehearsals, the actor should live his role so that when he's on stage, it's like having that person really there. So Stanislavski made this kind of acting possible. And after Stanislavski directed The Seagull, it succeeded. And he did the further plays also, including The Cherry Orchard. Now you might be thinking, this sounds like a marriage made in heaven. Chekhov, a very realistic, very low-key, subtle writer. No large gestures, no loud speeches, no sensational events in Chekhov's plays. And Stanislavski, who would all make it so realistic and all that. But they had a lot of arguments, I gather. And I think Stanislavski tended to go off, to exaggerate the slowness and whatnot. So I believe it is said that a particular scene which should have taken place in 20 minutes on stage, as per Chekhov's plans, was stretched to 40 minutes by Stanislavski. So he kind of overdid it. He was influenced by the Meiningen ensemble. Now, I don't think we need to really go into all this, but through Europe at that time, there was this movement towards realism, realistic acting, decrease in sentimentality, melodrama, and so on. Okay, so Stanislavski paid a lot of attention to psychological realities of characters. And later on, when I was a kid, at least, I had heard of Lee Strasberg, and that generation of Marilyn Monroe and so on, all went to Lee Strasberg's method acting classes in Hollywood. And Lee Strasberg was basically imitating Stanislavski. I mean, he had learned from Stanislavski. Okay, so the setting of this play that we are talking about today, it's pre-revolution Russia. Now, Russia has been communist Russia for so long that I think it's almost hard to try to imagine what it was like before it became communist. Now, we all know that in 1917, there was a revolution. Revolutions don't happen overnight, and revolutions don't happen for nothing. So a lot was brewing for a long time. There was a lot of dissatisfaction. There was a lot of poverty. There was a lot of desperation. And it is in those years before the revolution that Chekhov has placed the action of his plays. So we are looking at a family that belongs to the class of the landed gentry. Now, today, that class would be shown as villainous, predatory, exploitative. But Chekhov shows us that they were beautiful people. They were rich, yes, but they had taste, they had elegance, they knew how to use their money. Now, these are people who have so much money, who have always had so much money that how much ever they spend, the money never ends. That's what they used to. So Madame Ranovskaya, who is a member of that class and who owns this estate called the Cherry Orchard, is like that. Now, over the years, with the loss of free labor and all that, the estate has become more of a liability than productive. So she has no money, the money is all gone, but she has not been able to adapt to her new identity as a person without money. I mean, she doesn't know how to behave. So she continues to spend, so that she's in debt. The estate is mortgaged to the hilt. And in Act 1, what happens is that she arrives back from Paris, where she has been for 5 years. And her daughters, Varya and Anya, are waiting for her because they are living the reality of this mortgaged estate. And they're waiting for their mother to find the answer, do something. They also have an uncle. And also, because he's the man and he has an estate next door, they think that maybe he would sort it out for their mother. But both characters are so ineffectual, so effete, that word, decadent, effete, cannot actually do anything. Now, Lopahin, who is the grandson of a serf on their estate, the guy who's now become rich, he has come to welcome Madame Ranovskaya home. It just shows you what affection he remembers her with. So he's come, the train is to come at 2 a.m. or something, but he has come at that time to welcome her home. And particularly because he is concerned about her, he loves her, she's been very kind to him in the past and he wants to help. And he, as a businessman, knows the pulse, as it were, of the times, and he has an answer for her. So as soon as she comes, he tells her, he says, Madam Granovskaya, you have to do something. The estate will be auctioned in August. You know, it's so mortgaged. So you have to save the estate. And he has a solution. What do you know? So you would think that the play would move towards the solution, wouldn't you? But in actuality, the play has been called drama of inaction. Nothing happens. And in fact, when he tells her the answer, that is to make plots for summer cottages and to lease them out, and then she would have, not only would she be continue to own the estate, but she would have an income. And with that income, she would pay off the mortgage and so on. But this leasing the land to vulgar middle class people from the city, you know, this is not acceptable to her at all. And when he offers this solution, now different translations have different answers, but the spirit is the same. Granovskaya says, who's smoking a cigar? I mean, does that have anything to do with what they're talking about? And then she says, vulgar. Or Gaev says, vulgar. How can you lease out your land? How vulgar. To middle class people from the city? Oh, no. Now, it is May. The trees are in flower. The beauty of the estate, the beauty of the lifestyle, the generosity, kindness of the people, you know, of the landed gentry class is all shown to us. We love them. They are lovable. But the estate will be auctioned off in August. And, you know, usually if you tell me to make one slide about the plot of a play, I would not be able to do it because so much happens. But here we are. In one slide, I've said it all. The estate gets auctioned off in August because Madame Granovskaya doesn't do anything. Now, if there is no solution and you do nothing, nobody can say anything. But when a solution is offered to you in the month of May, what excuse do you have for having done nothing till August? And she says things like, oh, I love the estate so much. If the estate goes, then you may as well kill me because I don't want to live without the estate. I mean, she makes these statements and they're not untrue. They're true. She loves the estate. She has such happy associations, but she does nothing. How do you, I mean, what do you make of that? Now, she is kind, she is caring, she is lovable, she loves the estate. Now, she has two daughters and they are waiting, as I said, for her to do something. And she doesn't do anything. Now, the uncle, Gael, makes very irresponsible promises to Anya in Act 1. He says, don't worry, I think I'll be able to take a loan. Or maybe we'll ask your aunt in Yaroslavl to lend us some money. No, aunt is rich. So some landed gentry, most of the landed gentry have lost their money and are in dire situations. But a few lucky people have managed to hold on. Now, the aunt is one of those. So in terms of the history that it is showing, it is very realistic, right? Or we'll get, he says, Anya, we'll get you married to a rich man. Now, I mean, these are not impossible things, but none of them happen. And they don't really try to make any of them happen. I don't see them looking around for any rich man for Anya to marry. Now, these are images of Madame Granovskaya from the Judi Dench film. And of course, one of them, the black and white one, is from a different production altogether. That's Gaev with Varya and Anya. And this is Madame Granovskaya with her two daughters, Varya and Anya. You can see that she's soft, affectionate, sophisticated, elegant, lovable. Her name is Lyubov, which means love, by the way. Now, the two people who are not from that class, Lopahin and Trofimov. So Lopahin is the grandson of the serf, who worked on the estate. He's now a rich man. He dresses in fine calf leather shoes and good clothes, and he's devoted to the family. He tells Madame Granovskaya, just say yes to my solution. I will do everything. I will put the advertisements out. I will develop the land for you. I will make the plots. I will oversee everything. All she has to do is say yes. Now, Chekhov doesn't make it obvious, but we realize that Madame Granovskaya is steadily borrowing money from Lopahin. She keeps saying she has no money and she keeps spending money. So you and I will wonder, but she keeps borrowing from Lopahin. And just one little sentence where she says, Lopahin, I'll have to borrow from you again. And that's when we realize, oh, she's been borrowing from him. Trofimov is the eternal student. He's 27, but looks much older. And here he's with Madame Granovskaya. They're having an argument. They both insult each other really in that argument, and he goes off in a huff and all that. But he falls down the stairs while he's going, and so he has to come back. There's a lot of comedy, in the Cherry Orchard. Lopahin, you can see, is a sort of a hilarious character. He makes such a fool of himself. He's a bit of a joker, everything is ridiculous. Now, why? Because he has no social graces. He's worked hard, he's made money, but he doesn't have the kind of social graces that the landed gentry are sort of born with practically. Now, we realize that Madame Granovskaya has not married a person of her own class. He is dead now, but he was a commoner. He was a lawyer, but although he never worked as a lawyer, and he was a bit of a drunkard. She falls in love with someone and she goes off to be with him in Paris. Now, who leaves her children behind. Now, her excuse is that it is because her youngest child, Grisha, drowned in a pond in the estate at the age of 11. And she was so hurt, so upset, she could not stay there anymore. And so she left. But this does mean that she left her 12-year-old daughter and her older daughter there to fend for themselves on the estate. It's an estate steadily losing money. Now, it is well known that Varya and Lopahin mean to get married. They're in love with each other. And Madame Granovskaya does not object, although he's the grandson of a serf, she does not object. So she's broad-minded enough, liberal-minded enough, but Lopahin never gets round to actually proposing. And those were the days when a woman had to wait for a man to propose. Madame Granovskaya even tries to engineer a situation in which Lopahin will have to propose, but somehow it kind of fizzles out. It doesn't happen. There is Varya. Here he is intending to make the proposal, but the words don't come out of his mouth, and he leaves, and Varya is left high and dry. And Madame Granovskaya, although she creates the situation, doesn't see it through. Again, irresponsible, I guess. Anya is 17 at this time, and when the estate gets auctioned off in August, they have to leave. The family has to leave. And they do. They leave. So Act 4, which is the last act, Act 1 saw the arrival of Madame Granovskaya. Act 4 sees the departure of Madame Granovskaya. Does she take her daughters with her? Now, she expected Varya to marry Lopahin and therefore be okay, but that hasn't happened. So Varya is going to work as a housekeeper somewhere, and it's very vague. Anya, this is the most terrible thing, is left under Trofimov's care. What? For God's sake, what is going on? How can she do this? Are they in love with each other? No. Trofimov says they are above love. Trofimov is this interesting guy. Now, if you just glance through the text of the play, you will see that whenever Trofimov speaks, he speaks a whole page at a time. So he's a speechy fire, he is so pompous. And he says things like, he tells Anya, why are you upset about losing your estate, your land, your cherry orchard? All Russia is our orchard. How about that? What a grand statement. But in practical terms, what does it mean? Now, it's all very well. He's a communist. He symbolizes the future. And he says the whole country belongs to us. Why does any land have to belong to any particular person? Communist ideology, we understand, we know what he's talking about. But in practical terms, how can you tell Anya at this point in time, when there is no money in the family, that all Russia is our orchard? What is that girl supposed to do? And when the play ends, I am so worried about her. I'm not even going into the minor characters. If if you'd like to discuss them later, we can. So the estate is sold. It's lost to the family. And Ranevskaya, Madame Ranevskaya, again goes off to Paris, if you please. Now, she has spent 5 years with that lover of hers, and that lover turned out to be quite a dastardly chap. He was ill, first of all, terribly ill, and she nursed him, very devotedly. Then he leaves her for another woman and goes off with her. And Madame Ranevskaya had to sell the property that she had bought in Paris in order to pay for all his medical treatment and all that on which she had spent, and to come back to Paris. As Anya says, I had not a kopeck, and neither had Mama. Okay, that's the situation. Okay, now Anya is supposed to study further. Now it's all very vague. She tells her mother, Mama, when you come back, we'll read books together. I mean, that's all very well, but I have this huge question. Where is Anya supposed to live? Is she to live with Trofimov, for God's sake? I mean, that's kind of inappropriate. And what is he going to be teaching her anyway? What's going to happen to her? Now, I will mention one minor character, Fears, who's 87 years old, and again symbolizes the old lifestyle. You're a very devoted servant, was a serf, never left. He never left even after the emancipation. He calls the emancipation bad. He doesn't know why it happened. Now, he's ill at the end, and Madame Ranevskaya gives the order that he is to be taken to a hospital. But everyone says yes, but nobody actually takes him to a hospital. And at the end, when they're locking up the house, Fears is still inside, and they lock it up and they leave. And on stage, Fears comes hobbling out of the room he was in and says, where's everyone? Have they gone? Have they forgotten me? So I guess that symbolizes the old lifestyle is dying, right? And he can hear the sound of an axe. The axe is cutting down the trees. Now, during the course of the play, you hear the sound of the axe, at the end, cutting down the cherry trees in the orchard, which means cutting down that old lifestyle. And you hear an unexplained sound twice in the play, the sound of a breaking string. Far away, it sounds like a string breaking and then reverberating, And they ask each other, what was that? What was that? Chekhov never explains what it is, but it is something breaking, There's a sense of loss associated with it. So this old genteel lifestyle is coming to an end. What a pity, because there was lots that was good about that lifestyle. Okay. Now, the way the screen sharing is happening, I cannot see the titles of my own slides. So I don't know what I've written up there. But
a comedy in 4 acts.
In quotation marks, right? So yes. So the title given to the play is The Cherry Orchard, and under that, a comedy in 4 acts. Now, when I read the play, while I was, I think, still in school or just gone to college, 16 years old or so, I was so sad at the end of the play. I had identified with Madame Ranevskaya, and she has so many good qualities. Although she's very human, she has imperfections. She has done stupid things, and she continues to do stupid things. But then, hey, isn't that for real? It never stops, does it? I was so sad for her, and I closed the book thinking in my mind that I had read a very beautiful, gentle tragedy. But the fact remains that Chekhov has called it a comedy. How do you see this as a comedy? So it is meant to be read as a comedy. How do you do that? So there are some things that Chekhov does so skillfully. One is distancing. He never allows us to get close to any of the characters. And he points out faults, stupidities, frailties, foolishness of each one. So you can't admire any of them really. Each one has good points, but the negatives are, I mean, the stupidities, the idiosyncrasies, the ridiculous aspect of each character is highlighted to the extent that you can't really identify with any. All right. Then undercutting. What is undercutting? I mean, just imagine here is a person standing tall and you cut off his legs. You're downsizing him, aren't you? So this is what Chekhov does. He does not allow any character to acquire heroic stature. Realism, they're all very gray characters. Now remember, this is the beginning of the age of modernism. So those grandiose characters and those speeches and those they are things of the past. And Chekhov is writing even after Ibsen. Ibsen brought realism into the theater, into European theater. Chekhov has gone one step further. He's very subtle with it, There are no large gestures. It's all very quiet, very low-key, which is how life is in reality. Then there's a bizarre humor in this play. Bizarre, ridiculous, crazy, but it is reductive. So it's like in Act 1, when Varya and Anya catching up with each other, about what happened in Paris and what's been happening on the estate, while Anya had gone to fetch her mother, remember? So she's been away for a while. Now, Lopahin wants to join the conversation. So he opens the door and he bleats. Now, in some translations, it is he moves like a cow or he bleats like a goat. I mean, whichever it is, how ridiculous is that? And they look at him and they sort of tell him, get lost. Then Pishchik, who's the third character belonging to the landed gentry, tells Madame Ranovskaya, you mustn't have so many medicines, it's not good for you. And I guess she ignores him. So he scoops all her medicines up and swallows them himself. How ridiculous is that? So that is also reductive, isn't it? Now, I like this expression, the human comedy. I think you can only understand the cherry orchard if you look at this expression, the human comedy. And I imagine Chekhov as this wise, white-bearded man sitting on a cloud, looking down on planet Earth and watching all these people, well-intentioned people, making fools of themselves, being so stupid. And that is the human comedy. So if you can keep your distance from the characters, it is indeed a comedy. It has been called a mood play. It's very nostalgic. It has been called a dark comedy, which basically means that it is disturbing and it has an open end, which is uncertain. You're not sure what happens. Now, I have talked about the characters to some extent already, but here's a little bit about them. Now, I think you've understood Ranovskaya, the elegance, the being born into riches and so on and so forth. She has all these, she makes these gestures, like the servants come to say goodbye, and she's so emotionally overcome that she gives her purse to them. Now the purse contained every last penny that she had. How could she just give it away? And the daughters are so annoyed with her, but she can't help it. That's the way they used to behave, and she can't stop herself. Lopahin is a self-made man. And in the Russia after the revolution, I think he would be played and was in fact played as the hero, the guy who made good, who moved from serfdom to riches. And is a practical man. He's a hardworking man. He's the only one really who you see working, looking at his watch, saying he has an appointment, he will be late, and so on and so forth. Trofimov represents the future. As I told you, he says, all Russia is our orchard. So, as in Tennyson's poem, Mort Theatre, that famous line, the old order changeth, giving place to new. Now, Chekhov died before the revolution happened, but he could see what was happening. He could see which way things were headed. Okay, I think we've talked. symbols in the play. There is the axe, of course, which cuts down the cherry trees, which means that lifestyle is being killed. There is the sound of the breaking string. So something is being lost, something beautiful is being lost. And the cherry orchard itself, you know. Now, why cherry orchard? Why not an apple orchard? Because the cherry tree is so beautiful, especially when it's in bloom. But it has a very short blooming period. It has a very short fruiting period. And in the play, we are told that this particular orchard now blooms only once in 2 years or some such thing. So its productivity has decreased and there's no market for it anymore. Once upon a time, people wanted to buy the cherries. Now they don't seem to want them. Then Fear says, we used to make jam out of it. But then they've lost the recipe now. So you see, something that was desirable is now useless. It is not desired anymore. So that the lifestyle of the landed gentry is a thing of the past. Now in the play, you see realism, you see symbolism, you see some tragedy, you see comedy. Is it a tragic comedy? People have offered this expression also. Is it a mood play, which means that it captures atmosphere. And the atmosphere is a nostalgic atmosphere, looking back with nostalgia at that lifestyle. Is it a dark comedy? Is it a disturbing, open-ended play? Drama of inaction. Now here I'd like to point out that, as I said, beginning of modernism, and you know that the stream of consciousness novel, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Dorothy Richardson, was a great landmark experiment where very little happened. There was hardly any plot, but characters were explored. I would say that Chekhov's plays are something like that. There's some parallel there. In his plays also, very little happens, but you understand these characters very well. Impressionism. Now, those of you who heard that talk from our collaboration with Alliance Française about Impressionism, now that was an art movement. Monet, Manet, etc. Degas, Morisot rather, and so on and so forth. Now, I call Chekhov also an impressionist because he gives us the surface, but he doesn't analyze too much. So if you want to ask the question, but why? Why does Madame Ranovskaya not give Lopahin an answer? Ibsen would have made sure that you understood why. He would put the evidence there, but not Chekhov. He leaves it to you. You think it out. This is what happened. Like the Impressionists gave only an impression, the surface. They did not delve below. So neither does Chekhov. With Stanislavski came the concept of the subtext. Everything doesn't have to be said. It doesn't have to be written in the play. There's so much that can be expressed in other ways. And silences and pauses are sometimes as speaking as words are. And of course, there is no melodrama, no sensationalism, no large gestures in Chekhov's plays. And that is that. I had lots of other slides which I decided I would not share because it would just become too long. So here we are. There's so much I haven't said, but there's also quite a lot that I have said. So shall we take the conversation further now from here?
Okay. Prashant, can you start? Prashant, would you be able to start now? I would like you to make a comment. Prashant, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
of course,
please.
Mohini has done a commendable job. She has discussed certain topics in great detail. And certain other things she has hinted at because there was no time later on. I can perhaps just build on certain things she said and thus in a way leave the open the topic for discussion. The first thing which I want to mention is that Chekhov in many ways was reacting against Ibsen, and he was very conscious that Ibsen had sensationalism, because Chekhov said that in real life we sit down together, we have tea, we discuss things, and then we go home. That's real life.
Yes.
An Ibsen play usually ends with a suicide or a woman walking out of her home, or, double suicides or a murder. Chekhov said those things don't happen every day. They are rare occurrences. So in real life, not much happens. I might mention a very unfair comment on Chekhov by Leo Tolstoy. Tolstoy said that in a play by Chekhov, a character, a woman is lying on the bed. She gets up, puts on her slippers, goes to the bathroom, comes back and lies down, and the curtain comes down. Now, that certainly is not true of Chekhov, but that is how somebody like Tolstoy would look at Chekhov. Because Chekhov's whole idea was to give us not what is only possible, but what is also probable, what happens every day. As he said, play should be as simple and as complex as life. And that's what he was doing. So I think that is one thing we should keep in mind. And secondly, I think we should observe that one character who has undergone massive changes in approaches to him is Trofimov. During the Russian Revolution and early years of Soviet Union, he was seen as a great hero. You see, he would come in front of the stage, make a great speech, and there would be thunderous clapping. Now he's seen much more as a clown, as an armchair revolutionary, as someone who hasn't done much. So that's one character that we ought to explore and explore fully. I want to differ slightly from Mohini about Lopahin. Mohini said that Lopahin was seen as really a kind of hero in the Soviet period. But actually, Lopahin was someone who has been supplanted. If you look at the class system, the Soviet revolution was one that was led by the working classes, the peasants and the workers, much more than the middle classes. 1905 was a middle class revolution. 1917, let's remember, had two revolutions. In 1917, I think April, Tsar handed over power to some kind of a popular government. Whereas in November, actually October 25, which was then November 7, now November 7, Lenin led the revolutionaries to overthrow the popular government, the so-called Mensheviks. And then, of course, Tsar was imprisoned, and there was considerable violence and bloodshed. And of course, even the smallest children in the family were shot dead. But that was, in a sense, that was also to supplant the middle class. Lopahin represents the rising middle class. And you observe that a lot of Russian writers of the period were anti-middle class. Tolstoy, of course, more than anyone else, they thought of the middle class as greedy, as grabbing, and as people who didn't deserve all the money they had. So I think we should look afresh at the character of Lopahin, because both Lopahin and Trofimov represent two interesting figures in the play. And as Trofimov says, he and Anya are above love. Obviously, they will become lovers, but we don't know when and how the whole thing will end. Because after all, for the ideals of the Russian Revolution, marriage was something bourgeois. I mean, people had to rise above marriage. So I wonder how things will shape. Madame Ranevskaya is lovable, but not responsible. I mean, that's the problem with her. And therefore, she can't control the lives of her children. I do want to mention one thing which we discussed very briefly in the morning, Mohini and I, and that's about the fact that Varya is an adopted daughter. You see, Varya is not someone from the class of Madame Ranevskaya. We are not told exactly what her upbringing is like, but we could gather that she is not from the same class. She was taken up by Madame Ranevskaya and brought up very much as an upper class lady. But because remember, they wanted to marry Lopahin. So she could fit into Lopahin's life, which someone like Anya or Madame herself would not. So I think that way there's a difference between the two girls. Anya is young, idealistic, looking to the future, impractical. In contrast, Varya is down to earth and very practical. Unfortunately, Varya cannot attract Lopahin. Lopahin, I think, is ambivalent about Varya. We are not quite sure why. Varya definitely wants to marry him, but Lopahin has different ideas perhaps he's afraid to marry. That will be real social climbing. On the other hand, he also perhaps is not a marrying kind. He has no time, for a wife and a family. I'm busy.
As Varya says, that's exactly what Varya says.
Making money. So
Varya says as much, right?
It says your connection is unstable. Am I audible?
Yes.
So anyway, and I think Mohini made a very, very good point about undercutting. And just a couple of things about the breaking a string. Remember, Fierce is more loyal to the old class than people of the class themselves. And it says the same sound was heard when the catastrophe came, meaning when the slaves were liberated, 1861. And as Mohini rightly said, all kinds of interpretations are given as to what happened, as to what the strings signifies. But essentially, it stands for the end of an era, the end of a certain way of life. And we are not quite sure what's going to happen. See, Chekhov did not live through the revolution. He could not quite understand what is going to happen. I will digress for a minute. Bertrand Russell once said that the two most impressive persons he met in his life were Gladstone and Lenin. And Lenin was by far the more cruel of them. And as we all know, Stalin was far more cruel than Lenin. So obviously, Chekhov could not anticipate what was going to come. So I think the breaking a string, again, has multiple associations, and each character thinks of it in its own way. In a sense, the responses to breaking a string indicate the temperament, the personality of the character. For Lopahin, it's something like a bucket falling or a cable breaking, whereas for Gaev, it's something beautiful. And the string, of course, is a string of the string instrument. That, of course, has been made clear, and you all figured out that. So I think perhaps we could start with these points. And Cherry Orchard is obviously the great showpiece of realism, perhaps its single most important achievement, although I'm a very, very great Ibsen fan. I'll accept that perhaps this play outshines Ibsen. So let's see, I think this is enough to start a discussion. Yeah, just one more point about silences and pauses. Chekhov, in many ways, prepared for the absurd by showing that in real life, we don't communicate. How many times do we complete our sentences? How many times do we listen to each other? Almost never. How often do we try to interact with each other? Because each person is lost in his own world. So I think that was a very, very important achievement of Chekhov, showing in some ways the failure of language. I think we have enough now to proceed further. I repeat,
Okay.
very fine.
I think Sheena wants to say something. She's been waiting for some time. Yeah. Sheena, go ahead.
I didn't realize that you can tell that from my face.
You are restless. I could see that. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a few points. I like to read a classic now and then. So thank you, Mohini, because, we get bombarded with all this. You must read the Booker list, and you must read this, and you must read the Midnight Library and all this modern stuff. And it's nice to go back to the classics sometimes. I just started reading it this morning because it was very short notice. So I didn't get beyond Act 1, but I like it. So I'm definitely going to finish it. And it's quite a short play, right? It's not very long. It's a short play, but there are so many worlds beyond worlds beyond worlds that you can, open yourself to so much of interpretation. There are two professors here today. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but when I started reading Act 1, I just felt that there were shades of 12th Night in this play. So I recognized some of the characters. I felt that Khot, his name is, he's like a Malvolio with his squeaky shoes. And Sir Toby is like Gayev, or Gayev is like Sir Toby, the brother. And Dunyasha is like a Maria. This is, these three characters just...
Interesting.
But I haven't gone very far into the play yet. So besides the symbols, there are lots of themes. I think that Chekhov was very far-sighted. He saw all this coming. He saw the winds of change blowing. He may not have lived through the 1917, revolution, but I think he saw it coming. And he sort of saw that the class system is going to break down. So that was all there. I like the grief which was present because Madame lost her son to some accident or something, a young son.
Yes,
so there
he
was
drowned.
yeah, and then there is a lot of romance and attraction. For example, the clerk likes the maid likes somebody else. Varya likes this guy, she's waiting for him. Anya is also attracted to this, whatever his name is. I think his first name is Piotr. Yeah, very difficult. Piotr, because when she first sees him, oh, Piotr, and she's very joyful. So there is some attraction there. And also Madame, I think she's selfless at times and selfish at times. She spends a lot of money, then she wastes a lot of money, but she doesn't see the tragedy that is going to come. She's quite thoughtless and reckless with her behavior. And she runs after the wrong kind of man, starting with her husband and then her lover in Paris. There are a lot of women who are attracted to those kinds of men. There's something about them. So that, they always fall for these kind of losers. So you can't help that. Yeah, I too felt, I don't know why it's called a comedy, because it's really sad. And it ends with a lot of loose ends, which are not tied up maybe deliberately. So
yes,
yeah, that's
because
what I want.
Sheena, I mean, that's impressionism for you. That's a dark comedy for you, right? Right? That's why it's like that.
And Mohini, what she said about impressionism is there. It's the same thing, because it's not made, one line here, one line there, geometric, just exactly a photograph of someone.
Chekhov refuses to give you all the information to understand everything. So the viewer, the spectator, reader, whoever, has to work it out for himself. What could it be? And yes, it is sad, but Sheena, did you appreciate that point about everyone? I mean, Madame Granovskaya above all, because it's sad because Madame Granovskaya loses the estate, right? That's what's sad. But when she had the answer to how to save it in Act 1, and she does nothing about it. I mean, she dares to tell Lopahin that it's vulgar. Isn't that ridiculous? And that's the human comedy, right? That she knew how to save herself, but she did not do it.
That's what I felt. She was delusional.
I think it's a question of
in front of her, but she can't accept it.
I think it's a question of what is meant by saving herself. She can save her property, but she doesn't see it as a piece of property. She sees it as a way of life. I think you raised a very good point about Shakespeare. I just want to mention that the play has overt references to Hamlet. Lopahin sees himself as Hamlet and Varya as, as an Ophelia. I think it's a very wrong impression that he has got, but I think that's what he thinks of. Actually, Shakespeare is very highly regarded in Russia. Guess who was his translator? Boris Pasternak himself. Shakespeare is highly regarded both in Russia and Germany. Let's not forget that. He is admired in both the countries.
Indu, we would like to hear from you. Indu, can you see? Can't see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Indu.
We've always enjoyed Anton Chekhov, and the play, the proposal was put up by my father and people long ago. So the whole comic view of life is actually serio comic and tragic comic, and that was his forte. That was Anton Chekhov's forte, and that's what he enjoyed most, and he did very well. And Mohini brought that out in Cherry Orchard. That's what I appreciated. And we loved Anton Chekhov for his special gift. And whether it's modernism or however you like to look at it, people are weird because they don't make up their minds and people don't seem to advance. And there is so much, you think it's stagnation because of lack of action, but there's a lot of going on in their minds. And that he brings out in the play. That's what they
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.
Basically, Madame Granovskaya belongs to
Yeah.
a class which has always had loads of money, more than they could even, think of spending out. And she cannot imagine this situation. It's just beyond her. I mean, she knows it's going to happen, yes, but she cannot sort of wrap her mind around it. And by the way, nobody asked who bought the estate.
Mo, I got someone has asked. That is Sheena. Sheena wants to know: can I attend your next time in your Meera College grad class, Mohini?
Who got the estate?
Okay.
I think Lopakin bought it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Oh, I
Which
love
I found very treacherous of him.
now. Is it? Because that's how Granovskaya reacts. She sort of
I will. I'll give you
fall and she has to be held up. She's so shocked by the news. I mean, this person whose grandfather was a serf, he has bought her estate. I mean, how terrible, how can it be? But I don't think he set out to buy it. In fact, he was acting in her interest. He was there at the auction for her sake, and he was trying to stop the major bidder, that Deraganov or some such, who was determined to buy it. He was trying to stop him by counter bidding, hoping that he would raise it sort of beyond his ability, to spend. But what does that mean? I mean, once you keep bidding, it means that you are the buyer. I think it spiraled out of control. I don't think he meant to be treacherous at all. But of course, he is elated when he realizes that, my God, he now owns the estate where his grandfather was a slave.
More, I think Anna is there. Anna, I can see you, Anna, now.
Hi,
Hi. You have attended those classes. I know that. You mentioned that.
No, I attended via my daughter, of course.
Okay.
I'm too old to have been there at that time. Anyway, no, Mohini was teaching my daughter, and so I got my hands on the book. And then I would discuss with my daughter. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, Mohini, I really, I mean, and even Prashant, I think, I was so happy to attend this because it really expanded my whole view of things. And even bringing in the Shakespeare parallel and stuff, that was fantastic. And I just want to say that when I read it at that time, I could see the parallel with what was happening with our ancestral properties in Goa, where everything was just too high class to actually look at the nitty-gritty of life. Everyone was too in their own, sort of, airy-fairy ideas of what's good and what's not good. And, we can't have Dubai money coming in and whatever it may be. And in the end, nothing happened, if you know what I mean. And at that time, it struck me like, okay, so this is a kind of universal phenomenon. So,
yes.
And really
also, if you think of it like transcending its boundaries, and not only thinking of it as set in Russia of a particular era, but just think of it as a character who is faced with the need to change and is unable to change.
Yes.
A very human thing.
I'd like to say that's not that because they were irresponsible. It's because their upbringing made it not possible for them, if you know what I mean.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
There was
Yes.
such a restricted upbringing because I
Yes.
could say that about some of my own family members, that, this genteel upbringing was so restrictive, especially for women, that would make it very difficult for them to take that kind of decision that she
Yes.
was faced with. Yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Absolutely, I agree. She's unable to actually deal with it.
Yes, yes.
In her
Uh,
mindset, this situation is unimaginable.
there's a newcomer here, Rohinton. You're coming for the first time. I would like to hear what your comments would are on today's program.
Okay.
Yes, please switch on.
Rather than comments, if I could ask a question, I
Please.
remember reading somewhere that Chekhov inspired quite a few American playwrights. And I especially remember Eugene O'Neill's name. Would Mohini or someone be able to say something about that? Because compared to, if I may say so, Chekhov's placidness, Eugene O'Neill was a lot more dramatic, a lot more
Intense.
yes. So any ideas or any thoughts on quote unquote his inspiring these American playwrights?
I do not know. Prashant might know. Yeah.
Chekhov inspired Tennessee Williams, and Williams acknowledged that. See, Williams also aimed at atmosphere, and that he got from Chekhov. Use of music, use of different kinds of sounds and light effects. Chekhov inspired Williams to take it up. Moreover, Williams also shows the decline of a class. The old South, that was aristocratic, giving way to the new industrial culture of the middle classes, the traders, not the shopkeepers, industrialists taking over. And Williams felt nostalgic about it. So I think Williams is definitely, and he mentions it clearly, inspired by Chekhov.
But possibly not O'Neill. Huh?
No, I guess not. O'Neill's inspiration was Strindberg.
Okay, probably I remember wrong, very likely.
Okay, but Rohinton, come regularly. You'll find a lot of interesting subjects to be
Sure, I will. Yep.
I'll put you, if you can send me an email.
I'll do that. Yep, sure.
satishkhot@gmail.com.
Okay.
I will put you on the various boards
along
with your phone number.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I think I would like to ask last question to Friana, the youngest person I think here in that. Yeah, Friana, no, 1 minute. No, don't smile and run away from it. Go ahead and talk.
So I actually had the privilege to study this play for over a month with Mohini ma'am last year. And I remember at the start of it, I felt it's incredibly slow. Nothing's happening. When is this going to end? Where is the action? There is nothing happening in this play. There is sitting and chatting, until we had this sort of discussion where she put the entire play into context in that one last lecture. And there I was like, oh, okay, this is what it is hiding under that surface. Another thing that I thought about during the session today itself was when she pointed out about impressionism, and on the other hand, she was speaking of stream of consciousness. It kind of struck that the way the entire artistry of Chekhov in this play becomes that he has given us detailed understanding of every character, and yet we cannot exactly comprehend their actions at some point of the play. Like, we know what Renovskaya is like. We are in complete understanding of her personality, of her from where she's coming from. But then, as ma'am quite rightly said, we don't know why she does not give Lopakin an answer. And I think that is something very, very intriguing to me, because we know a lot and yet we don't know anything. that kind of parallel comes into play, which makes this play really, really interesting. And that is what I felt throughout the play.
Thank you.
And okay, one last, Friana, I want you to give a vote of thanks to Mohini.
Okay. Wow. So Mohini ma'am, thanks a lot for this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation that you've given us today. It really brought me back to 2020, where I was sitting in my room studying Chekhov for the first time, and wondering what was it, and then understanding what it was. And it's been remarkable to have been with you for over a year now. And today's session was really, really informative, short compared to what we've done, but definitely had its essence, had everything that you bring to the table. And I couldn't thank you enough for that. So
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Friana.
By the way, Friana is my, very precious assistant. She finds things on the net for me. When we're looking for a text, a PDF text that we can all share, she's the one who finds it. There are times when I don't think it's available. I've reached that conclusion and she finds it.
Friana, you have taken my place. Thank you. Okay, Mo, tell us about what the programs, etc.
Yes.
We close this out.
So let me tell you what to expect next Sunday. So next Sunday is the 5th of December, and Anjan Mane will be talking about Kafka's The Trial. Okay. If you remember, this was scheduled earlier, but because of the floods in Kolhapur, he was not able to present it then. So now 5th of December is when we will hear from him. And the file, of course, is available, the net, and it's not so long, so we can all read it. Then on the 12th of December, Sanjay Phadke will be talking about weapons of math destruction, which was postponed from 2 weeks ago. So that's scheduled. And then 19th of December, Ravi Sonalkar will be talking about Sapiens. All right. That very famous book, Sapiens. And I think that's enough about the future. So we hope to see you all.
And the book club wishes Mohini a very happy birthday. Her birthday is the day after tomorrow. So we wish her a very happy birthday also.
It's
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
noted and saved.
Okay, I think let's wind up now.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be having another classic next week.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Rohinton, please come again. I would like you to participate.
Yes,
also.
surely will.
Prashant,
Thank you.
thanks a lot, Prashant. We're looking forward to your presentation soon. I haven't heard for quite some time.
Well, let's see when we can do it.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Good
much.
night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Abhi.
Prashant. Thank you, Friana. Thank you, Sheena.
Thank you, Mohini.
Thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you next Sunday.
Sheena,
Right.
keep in touch.
Thank you.
Fiona, etc. Please do keep in touch. Kusum, good to see you. Or hear you.
Yes.
And Ronnie,
Anji,
we'll be meeting regularly now.
Yes,
all the
thank
very
you.
best. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right
Thank
out.
you. Wonderful. Excellent.
Thank you.